Today, we're seeing even more fallout from Monday's Supreme Court ruling involving former President Donald Trump. The court decided that presidents do have immunity from prosecution, but only when it comes to official acts. Skylar Henry has the report. Trump's legal team is now pushing to have his New York hush money conviction tossed out, pointing to the Supreme Court's major ruling on presidential immunity for official duties. There were a few checks signed while he was president, but I think it's going to be extremely difficult to argue those fall under any category of official conduct. Those were simply personal, unofficial acts for which he was open to prosecution. In a major ruling, the Supreme Court's 6-3 conservative majority declared that presidents have absolute immunity for official actions that fall within their core constitutional powers, presumptive immunity for other official actions, but no immunity for anything unofficial. You have to give a president full and total immunity. But the court rejected Trump's claim that he was fully immune from prosecution for his conduct surrounding January 6, sending the matter back to Judge Tanya Chutkan to decide which actions can still be prosecuted. Conversations with Mike Pence to halt certification? Those may still be on the table. Now, this next part is where things get wild. The Supreme Court just did something no one expected. It denied Trump's emergency request to fire a federal commissioner. This is the same Supreme Court that has backed Trump over and over again, giving him win after win after win. But this time, the court said, "No, not yet. We're waiting. We're scheduling oral arguments for January 2026. We're going to let this case move properly through the system. And until then, the commissioner stays in her position. She's not getting fired. Trump doesn't get what he wants." It's a stunning moment. A genuine pushback from a court that has mostly aligned with Trump's agenda. But before we keep going, let's be honest. Headlines just aren't trustworthy anymore. That's exactly why we built Pump Politics, to give you actual stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want the news without distortion, join our free newsletter. It's delivered straight to your inbox every day. Links in the description. And if you want to support the work we're doing, join our community. It really matters. All right, let's get back to it. Presumptively official, yes. But I still think Judge Chutkan will conclude that the government can overcome that presumption. President Biden condemned the ruling, calling it dangerous because the presidency would no longer be meaningfully constrained by the law. Trump, meanwhile, celebrated the ruling as a massive win for the Constitution and democracy. One thing is almost guaranteed now: Trump's election interference trial won't take place before November. Skylar Henry, CBS News, Washington. And if Trump wins the election, he could potentially pardon himself in the January 6th case or have his appointed Attorney General dismiss the charges entirely. Now let's get to what this whole case is actually about. Trump wants the power to fire federal commissioners. He wants to remove people without cause. He wants to clear out the federal government of anyone who isn't personally loyal to him. And he's been trying to accomplish this through Schedule F, an executive order that would reclassify civil service roles so he could fire them more easily. But courts blocked Schedule F. Lower courts said no, you can't do that. It violates federal law. So Trump appealed to the Supreme Court, asking them to immediately allow him to fire a federal commissioner while the case is still being appealed. The Supreme Court said no. They'll wait. They'll hear arguments in January. They'll take their time. And until then, the commissioner stays right where she is. This is huge because it shows the Trump-appointed Supreme Court actually pushing back on Trump. It shows the court drawing a boundary, refusing to rubber stamp everything Trump wants. This is something we have rarely seen. Yes, the Trump court has sided with Trump on birthright citizenship, immigration, DI, and so much more. But on this civil service issue, they're tapping the brakes. They're saying, hold up, let's think this through. Why? Well, the case deals with statutory protections for federal commissioners. The heart of the case is whether the president has the authority to fire them without cause. And that's a huge constitutional question. If Trump can fire commissioners without reason, he can effectively control the entire federal government. He can remove anyone who disagrees with him, install loyalists everywhere, and reshape the entire system into one fully aligned with his personal agenda. That shifts the entire balance of power. Some justices might have realized that giving Trump unlimited firing authority would hand the presidency near total power. It would strip federal agencies of independence. It would eliminate internal checks within the executive branch. And maybe even the conservative justices thought that went too far. Maybe they decided the presidency needs limits. Maybe they thought the federal government needs at least some insulation from political loyalty tests. So they slowed things down. They scheduled arguments. They took a pause. And that pause is incredibly important. This is the court revealing its limits. A court dominated by Trump appointees is saying, "We're not just granting everything you ask for. Not this time." A court that normally votes Trump's way is signaling that executive power still has boundaries. And that matters. It shows the rule of law isn't completely gone. Trump, of course, is furious. He believes he should be able to fire commissioners instantly. He believes the court should have given him what he wanted without delay. But the court refused. Arguments will happen in January. The commissioner stays for now. Trump's plan to reshape the government slows down. His push to consolidate power gets delayed, exactly what he didn't want. Trump's strategy relies on speed. He wants to reorganize the federal government before anyone can intervene. But the Supreme Court is saying, not so fast. We need to consider this. And timing matters enormously. We're approaching the 2026 midterms. Trump wants control of the federal workforce ahead of the elections. He wants to purge anyone who might stand in his way. But this court-imposed delay gets in the way of that. It gives Congress time, advocacy groups time, the public time, and that changes political consequences. So yes, this is a stunning moment. A moment where the Supreme Court actually resisted Trump. A moment showing that even Trump's own appointees think there must be limits on executive power. A moment that signals the system may still have some checks left. So let's dive deeper. Let's really understand what's happening and why it matters for American democracy. Most people are looking at this ruling and missing the bigger picture. They're treating it like a simple federal employment dispute. But here's what they're overlooking. This is the Supreme Court drawing a line. This is a rare instance where Trump's own justices are acknowledging that even the presidency has boundaries. Here's what actually happened. Trump filed an emergency application asking the court to fast-track the firing of a federal commissioner. His administration argued the lower courts were wrong. They argued Trump must have the right to fire commissioners without cause. They argued the government would suffer chaos if Trump wasn't allowed to remove her immediately. The Justice Department basically claimed that without this firing, the federal government would fall apart. But the Supreme Court said no. They refused to grant the emergency stay. They scheduled oral arguments for January 2026. And until then, the commissioner keeps her job. This marks a shift in how the court responds to Trump's emergency filings. Over the past year, they've granted almost everything he's asked for, especially on immigration and birthright citizenship. But this time, the court didn't speed things up. They slowed things down. They want argument. They want analysis. They want time. Why? Because this case touches on foundational questions about separation of powers and presidential removal authority, questions the court knows cannot be rushed. It may also indicate disagreements among the conservative justices themselves. Some may believe Trump should have sweeping removal power. Others may worry that would dismantle agency independence. So the court chose to hear full arguments. And remember, this all revolves around Schedule F, Trump's plan to strip civil service protections and replace career officials with loyalists. Lower courts blocked it. Trump wants the Supreme Court to undo those rulings. If he succeeds, the federal government as we know it changes fundamentally. Independent agencies disappear. Civil servants lose protection. The entire executive branch becomes subject to Trump's personal control. That's what makes the court's caution so significant. They could have granted Trump an immediate win but didn't. They slowed him down. Which signals at least some concern about his argument. And this delay has massive implications. It buys time for Congress, time for advocacy groups, time for the public to understand what's at stake. Every month without Schedule F is a month agencies stay independent. Every month Trump can't fire people without cause is a month the system stays intact. Now let's outline what this moment really means. First, the Supreme Court turned down Trump's emergency request. That alone is remarkable given their past record. Second, this slows Trump's entire plan to purge the civil service. Oral arguments are months away. Rulings won't come until mid-2026. Until then, protections remain. Third, this exposes real limits within the Trump court. A court that almost always sides with him said no, not this time. Fourth, it shows the rule of law isn't fully broken. Courts can still check the president. So what comes next? Arguments in January. A ruling sometime in spring or early summer. And that ruling will decide the future of the federal workforce, whether agencies remain independent or whether they become completely subordinated to Trump. The court's decision not to grant an emergency stay suggests Trump's position isn't as strong as he claims. The outcome isn't predetermined. The court is genuinely weighing the case. And that uncertainty is healthy for democracy. Even if Trump wins in the end, the delay itself has already slowed his consolidation of power. It gives the system room to breathe. And that matters. For now, the commissioner stays. Civil service protections stay. Agency independence stays. And that is, for the moment, a small but meaningful victory for the rule of law, a sign the system still has some strength left.